This is WXNA LP Nashville 101.5 FM.
But it was just our dignity, you know?
We chanted the mother song. We held our breath. Inhale. Exhale.
You're listening to Public Comments, an arts equity radio show on WXNA 101.5 FM, Nashville.
Thank you for tuning in today. This is Public Comments. I am Christine Hall.
And I'm Lydia Yousief.
We are here today with our guest, Nivedhan Singh. Nivedhan is a sound designer, domestic violence advocate, educator, and educator challenging inclusion norms in Nashville's arts industry. He has promoted arts accessibility through teaching at Concord Academy and Notes for Notes, serving on the boards of Street Theater Company and The Quiet Voice, and leading community engagement at major Nashville arts organizations like TPAC and Nashville Repertory Theater. As the lead singer of Tennessee's only Asian-fronted punk rock band, Sleepaway Camp, and co-host of Emotionally Available, a podcast, Nivedhan inspires change and fosters accountability in the arts. Thank you so much for joining us today, Nivedhan Singh.
Thank you so much, Christine and Lydia, for having me. It's great to be here.
It is a joy and a pleasure and an honor. And for our listeners, this limited series, Public Comments, is dedicated to building an artist-centered narrative about the Title VI complaint process that got artists their money back here in Nashville while exposing discriminatory funding practices. The show will function as an archive and roadmap as we continue advocating for the equitable arts funding our city deserves. Now, Nivedhan, before we get started with your public comment, would you like to tell us a little about your background and what brought you to this work?
Yes, I would love to. So I started studying music in college to become a studio recording engineer. So logically found my way in Nashville eventually after teaching high school for 3 years, where I was teaching digital music and sound recording to high school students at Concord Academy. And it was there that I sort of went through this faux grad school in terms of professional development around education, but also specifically around community equity and inclusion work. So I have a great deal of respect and owe a lot to my colleagues at Concord Academy, people like Laura Twitchell and Aristiles Hall, who really taught me how to speak truth to power within institutions. So then I brought that with me here as I started to try and find recording studio work and found this niche in doing sound design for theater here in Nashville, and really enjoyed theater, grew up doing it myself, even though it wasn't what I specifically thought I would specialize in. I've really enjoyed that work, and it has put me in various arts monopoly ecosystem since I've been here. And as an artist myself, I've had to navigate some of the administrative obligations of those roles while also maintaining my my own ethics and morals around how we can do this in a more equitable way. So I do get a little bit of a reputation as a pot stirrer.
Well, you're a punk rocker. You gotta rouse the rabble.
I do often hear about institutional decisions and think that's not very punk rock. And I aim to make things as punk rock as possible, especially when it comes to artists who are suffering because arts monopolies are hoarding funds.
Oof, wow. Well said. Thank you, Nivedhan. Now, usually at the top of the show, we like to invite our guests to share a public comment as one would at a publicly noticed meeting for, say, the Arts Commission. And those are usually limited to 2 minutes. We have a little more flexibility here, and then we like to spend our hour unpacking. Would you like to set us off with a public comment?
I would love to.
Yes!
Right. My name is Nivedhan Singh, and I'm here to speak about the systemic racial biases at arts monopolies in Nashville, particularly regarding the firing of Dr. Mary Clark at the Tennessee Performing Arts Center. Dr. Clark's removal was a clear example of big picture breaches of trust with Nashville's BIPOC arts community. It signaled that TPAC's commitment to diversity was performative, especially when she was then replaced by a white administrator with close ties to the leadership responsible for maintaining the status quo. Beyond that, Arts Monopolies in Nashville have a pattern of high BIPOC turnover, tokenism, and microaggressive behavior. As the only BIPOC person in multiple executive meetings, I was pressured to serve as some kind of designated BIPOC emotional counselor for white superiors, while incidents of racism, from mocking Black and Latinx students to undermining BIPOC-led initiatives, were ignored. When concerns were raised by me, HR failed to come to an ethical conclusion despite initial attempts at repair. This isn't just about one person. It's not just about me. It's about a culture that silences and discards BIPOC voices while hoarding state funding that should uplift them. We need real accountability, not optics. The community is watching. Thank you.
Oh, Nivedhan Singh, thank you. We so appreciate having you today. This is such important stuff you are here to speak on.
Thank you, thank you. It's not easy to talk about, but I'm glad that y'all are here at Arts Equity and highlighting these voices. It really means a lot to us.
I think you have such a unique perspective because you're inside the system and also outside the system simultaneously. And I think a lot of people who are inside the system have kind of a fear about rattling it. And so I appreciate what you said at the top of the hour in your background. Could you speak a little bit more about equity work that you were learning? And you said that you were pairing it with speaking the truth. And I thought that was very interesting. Could you speak more to that?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that the truth will set us free, and that in our honest admission of even wrongdoing, that we can do a lot better in terms of gaining trust within the community. However, I felt that in a lot of my roles, both at TPAC and at Nash Rep, there were some norms that I was sort of forced to adhere to, and there was sort of this mentality of, this is the work. If you don't want to do the work, you can get out of here.
Can you talk about those norms?
Yeah, so specifically at TPAC, I was the manager of education and community engagement, so I worked under a director and then a senior director. So my immediate supervisor was Kristen Dare Horsley, who's been working at TPAC. When I finished up, she was there for about 28 years. And the senior director, Roberta Chupa West, had a similar tenure there. So right out of the gate, there was this feeling of, from my superiors of, well, Nivedhan, what are your goals here? Where do you see yourself growing? Where do you see yourself, aspiring to within this organization? And when the two people right on top of you have been there for almost 30 years, where is your trajectory, right? When retirement is not really near in sight for them, where are you going, and how do you feel passionate about the work? So for me, it was about rooting things in inclusion and equity as much as possible. As the mission statement at TPAC stated, their first core value was inclusion. And then as my job description stated, that we would all adhere to and promote policies that supported diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I was very clear in my application and cover letter and my interview that I was there to speak truth to power, that I was there to challenge norms and highlight more artists like me. And the work that I was obliged to do was, or sort of forced to do in some ways, was, these are our top engagement clients. You've got the repertory theater, the opera, the ballet, and I could be forgetting one other, but there was sort of this feeling of, these are our big clients, these are the majority of our community engagement calendar, this is your focus. And to which my response was, well, they have affluent donors already and a ton of funding and marketing teams and development teams. Do they really need us to give people a free look into behind the scenes of their show so that we can highlight them further and provide free programming for them who are already charging a ton for their tickets? And it just felt like, even toward the end of my time there was this push to monetizing a lot of things that had been free as well. So I did feel like most of my engagement calendar was being signed off right out of the gate to these big performing arts organizations. And then when I would highlight, suggest let's highlight a North Nashville theater company, the most I think I ever got was like a story shout out for something the Destiny Theater Experience was doing. And I wanted to do more, but there was this feeling of folks sort of throwing their hands up and being like, well, what would that even look like? What would that even look like? And I said, well, I don't know, and I can't unilaterally tell you what that looks like, especially since I haven't been here very long, especially since I'm still learning that culture, but also I didn't have the power to do it. So a lot of my ideas were just put on the refrigerator to a large degree.
Right.
I think actually a lot of the story is very similar to Daniel Singh's story in Metro Arts, where he's brought in and there's this kerfuffle of like, we want to do equity work, and then the equity worker comes in and there are set quote unquote norms of like, this is what you have to do, you have to work with other white-led organizations.
Yes.
That's how we're going to define equity here. And that's something that we keep coming back to on the show, is like the lack of definition on equity means that these art monopolies can come in and say, well, my definition is, I think about, what's his name? Drew Ogles from the Rep Theater coming to do public comment and saying, the Rep put on the color purple. And he had like his little framed, photo, and thinking he deserves some brownie points. Like that type of attitude. When we don't define equity, art monopolies can come in and define it how they want.
Yes.
Not only externally, but also internally. I also thought it was interesting that you were asked multiple times, like, what would that look like? And like, there's no support system for you to be like, all right, we as an institution with a lot of money are going to make these kind of moves to make sure our equity workers, and you spoke a lot about that in your public comment about the performance of it all.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, when were you hired? Around what time?
I was hired in December of 2021 and worked there through about the end of 2023.
That's very telling.
Yes, exactly. And I think that there are, wow, you said so much there. For starters, yes, Daniel Singh, I completely relate to the way he was wronged. There is this feeling of, we want these people in our promotional materials. We want them in our brochures and pamphlets. We want them front and center in our staff photos. But when they start speaking their mind, then we start to have an issue. We didn't want actual change. We just wanted to look like we were changing during a time when it was very sexy to change.
Right.
And there are hundreds of Drews and Kristens and Robertas in these arts organizations, all still patting themselves on the back for doing black shows, black theater in February 10 years ago, and 20 years ago. That was an anecdote that was thrown at me frequently by my supervisor was, well, I remember when we could only do a black show in February, and like, we've just come so far. And I'm like, well, far is not enough.
I mean, are people all year round?
Right, and it's not enough to just do color purple and call it a day. And that is the problem, is that there are very well-meaning liberal leadership at that executive level who are just upholding a lot of destructive cultural norms in the status quo in that way.
Catering to the people who are already at center stage.
Yes. And then when I actually questioned them on several decisions, like I remember questioning my boss, Roberta, about the decision to include a Harriet Tubman virtual musical in our Season for Young People calendar that was written and produced by 3 white men.
Oh.
Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad, and in the musical they are singing and dancing and making light of the Underground Railroad, sort of like climb on board or you'll die, that kind of thing. And I watched it, I was supposed to present on it during a professional development day with Metro Nashville Public Schools. I was presenting on the Harriet Tubman musical, and I was presenting on a beautiful documentary about Fisk University. And I brought up my concerns. I said, this is not something that white men should be profiting off of. The music is disrespectful. The music's not even good. You can tell that. I know that gospel music has a wide breadth, but this did not sound like its best representation.
It's just unseasoned.
It was unseasoned, yeah. It was a little Wonder Bread gospel, and I brought it up and was very clear about my concern, and was told by Roberta that my email was strident, and was then told by Kristen that I needed to watch my tone with the way that I questioned authority, and that my questioning of Roberta being in Dr. Mary Clark's new old position, which had rebranded into something called Inclusive Arts Officer as opposed to Chief Diversity Officer, that the very act of questioning that was inappropriate. But I don't remember signing anything that said I wasn't allowed to question leadership changes, and I was nothing but publicly supportive of Roberta. But yes, there is sort of this, like, we would like you to be seen and not heard mentality when I was working there, that's for sure.
The caucasity to tone police, a genuine concern.
Yes.
Yeah, and authority, as if, you don't have your own, like, expertise and authority and validation. Yeah.
Yes, there was a lot of that, and that's when, she explicitly at one point even said, I just want you to know that you were hired because of your experience in education and community engagement. That's why I hired you. I don't expect you to be the voice for people of color. You know what I mean?
Whoa.
Yeah.
That is a crazy thing to say.
Yeah. I don't expect you to be the voice for people of color.
Because at the same time, they're telling you, what should we do?
Yes, there's a plea for help in there.
The contradiction where they're like, technically, we want you to carry the whole community on your back, but not like
that. But don't say anything about it. Yeah. Don't actually instantiate.
Equity.
Yeah, we're not going to change, but yeah.
That's actually like really mind-boggling to talk to people like that who like reverse equity work on equity workers,
right?
And just want to change the narrative so that it benefits them. It's really sick.
Yeah.
I can't imagine working in like that type of environment where you have, staff and coworkers who are like Uno reversing you all the time.
All the time, yeah. And it put a great deal of emotional strain on me. Like, I think there was when I got into that work in the first place, I was like, well, I'll change the system from within the system. And then you start to realize that there are aspects of it that are so ingrained, problems that will outlive you, that I sort of decided that I'd rather just have the system 1099 me, and then I can keep a healthy distance between myself and the system, because the emotional strain was not worth it. Like, it got to the point where I would sit in my car just like sweating and crying, like not wanting to go face this person. Like, the sound of her keys jingling would trigger me. Like, because I knew she was coming, and there was a fear response there. And a lot of my discipline was handled in a very private and appropriate manner. HR was kept completely out of it to save me embarrassment, I was told, when really what it led to was very private, borderlining on grooming meetings where I was being made to feel responsible for the emotions of my white supervisor. And it happened for hours at length, and I felt like it was completely inappropriate. And I waited too long to bring things up to HR, because I had been logging the pattern of behavior for a long time, and the sort of the institutional cliche they were able to pull out at the end was, well, why didn't you say something sooner?
Oh my God. That's terrible.
They've got their playbook, don't they?
Yeah, very victim-blaming behavior.
I do want to get more into the HR complaint and what that kind of looked like inside the institution. Just so like other equity workers can also hear about your experience with that. But I do want to add to that, like, as much as we're like focusing on you and your experience at TPAC, I think that this is, many people go through this. Many institutions run like this. And that's not to say like any type of excuse or because it's universal that, it's common, but that's to point out like we can take with what you're saying and apply it to other equity workers, and also look at kind of the larger scheme. So I just want to say that because I think people are going to think that this is only a TPAC thing or only a Nivedhan thing, and I think we've also heard from a lot of guests very similar things across Nashville. So there needs to be a larger systemic call to action.
Yes, 100% that, Lydia. Thank you. And thank you, Nivedhan, for what you have said so far. I'm going to take this moment to say to our listeners, if you're just tuning in, this is WXNA LP Nashville 101.5 FM. And this show is called Public Comments, where we are dedicated to advocating for equitable arts funding in Nashville. I am Christine Hall.
And I'm Lydia Yousief.
And our guest this week, Nivedhan Singh, is an audio engineer, educator, musician, activist, and former TPAC employee. Today we are looking at some of how the monopolies are misbehaving here in Nashville. And I do also want to just acknowledge what you had said at the top of the hour, Nivedhan, that this is difficult to approach this, especially you have your lived experience here. You put yourself at risk speaking truth to power. You're doing this. We know, of course, it's for the benefit of all, and just genuinely want to say our thanks and appreciation to you.
Thank you. It's the work that y'all have done has literally put money back into the hands of artists that deserve it. So thank you for everything that Arts Equity is doing. It's really an honor to be here and to be hopefully a comrade in this, because I definitely know what this feels like. And I think that when I was working at TPAC, when I say that it was emotionally challenging, but a large part of that was because I sniffed this out pretty early on. After about my first year, I was aware that something was wrong. And so I started doing my own data collection to protect myself. So there was this feeling when I finally did complain to HR of, well, why didn't you say something sooner? And really, I was getting all my ducks in a row to say something fulsome.
Because they require that.
Yes.
They will gaslight you. So,
yes.
Either way.
Yeah, and I think one of my main reasons for coming on the show is to share some of what that experience was like coming forward to HR, but also empower other arts employees to protect themselves by doing their own data gathering, receipt keeping, and logging to protect themselves in this scenario. Because there's a lot that I think I did right, and there's a lot I would have done different with this experience. Unfortunately, the lawyer that they hired to grill me for 4 hours in an office and ask very offensive questions to was a fixer. They hired Amy Whitten, who's literally like one of the lawyers that has gotten BP off before. Like, this is like a fixer who they called in to grill me. And the reality is that, the person that they were singling out in this moment had already been gathering information for a year. So I had already kind of had my ducks in a row to try and protect myself. And I honestly, the three biggest things that have empowered me to do this work, I would say the first thing is just creating a detailed timeline of everything that is happening, logging dates, screenshotting emails. I think that is first and foremost a really easy way to start protecting yourself in these situations.
And you're talking about even microaggressions,
everything.
Like anything. Okay.
Yeah,
Document,
someone said
document.
something racist in the staff meeting, log it. You were on Teams, screen record your Teams. If it's going to be a meeting that you think someone might say something offensive, especially if you live in Tennessee. This is a two-party consent state. So it is legal and admissible to record other people without them knowing it. And it sounds icky, it might feel icky, but if you get in a situation where it could literally save your career, it is important to keep that stuff in mind, that you do have means to protect yourself. So I would say gathering and logging your data, recording where possible, and I think another big thing was just timing, was just if you see something, just say it as soon as you see it. Because that prevents them from using this excuse of, well, why didn't you say something sooner? And that is a regret that I have, that they got to rest on the laurels of, well, he was late to work 10 times in 2 years, and so he's not credible. He's not credible. I was like, can we hold both things?
Yeah,
maybe
really.
there was a reason why I was late, maybe a good reason. And also, I can think of a lot of people at this institution who have been late 10 times in 2 years. I think we've all been late 10 times in 2 years.
Right.
Also, how does that excuse racism?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, way to change the subject.
The word
that's
that
violence.
the word that Kim Marone in HR said was apples and oranges. It's apples and oranges. Your lateness and the discrimination here, they're not the same thing. That's what you're being submitted for an employer review for is because of your tardiness. It has nothing to do with the color of your skin. And I was there just pleading and being like, can you not see the connection in the way that this is being handled? Because I think the most egregious timeline point that I have is that approximately April 27th of 2023 is when TPAC received $200 million in state funding for the new East Bank building initiative. So that's Bill Lee money in line with Bill Lee policies. So around this time, I remember being in community engagement meetings, planning meetings for plays like Mrs. Doubtfire, which included cross-dressing, and the idea that we had to be careful about our public community engagement strategies because of the drag ban. And that we were marching in line to the beat of Bill Lee's drum because we got this money. So we take the $200 million in state funding for the new building, and these are all approximate dates. So that was April 27th. Approximately May 5th, Dr. Mary Clark is fired from TPAC. The chief diversity officer is fired within a week of the state funding being received from Bill Lee.
What an interesting connection to draw there.
Yeah. Then we get an all-staff meeting with the CEO, Jennifer Turner, on June 20th. I'm late to this meeting, but I realized very quickly what's going on, which is that we are basically being, the whole experience of, or the whole situation with Dr. Mary is being explained away to us that this is the right thing to do. We don't want to be performative about our activism, so we don't need a figurehead in this role, is basically how it was explained. We're gonna move to a committee model. And I immediately shot up my hand, and I remembered when they hired Dr. Mary, they sent a big old email blast out to everyone, plastering her beautiful black face around everything, being very upfront about the fact that we have a chief diversity officer because it was 2020.
Not performative at all.
Not performative, right. So it's like, well, we don't want to be performative. So I raised my hand and I said, well, didn't we already do that? We're already in the performance arena because we performed our face out already. So now what are we going to say? And they said, well, we don't want to be performative. Well, I said, well, it's too late. We've already done it. So what are we going to say? Are we going to tell people that we're still committed to the work and we're moving to a committee model? Or are we just going to fire in the dead of night and forget about it? And to which I would find out even more startlingly that on, I would say 2 days later, June 22nd, everyone at the Tennessee Performing Arts Center, and I'm not kidding, gets a $1,000 bonus check. This is 2 days after they have a meeting with us explaining why firing Dr. Mary Clark was okay and better for the institution. And 2 days later, everyone gets a $1,000 bonus. So what happened? I can only speculate that her salary was then dissolved and just hacked apart and given to all of us. Like I felt dirty.
Like, hush,
yeah.
money.
So the committee's supposed to do it for free.
Wow.
Yes.
The theoretical committee. Okay.
I think I'm
that.
not sure what the situation was for Roberta's salary after she moved into that role, whether she got a raise, I don't know. But all I know is that I made a fuss about Dr. Mary getting fired at this meeting, justifiably so, because I said that, this is breaking trust in the community. This is a visible, the optics are bad. We're doing this, and from what I understand too, it was sort of like she was let go and then gone within days. And I was very adamant that also, while I thought that Roberta was qualified based on her experience, that I think that the optics are bad here. The community will feel that we have broken trust, compounded with the arts, with the Metro Arts Commission funding kerfuffle, and just how much money that TPAC received over COVID, hundreds of thousands of dollars, the $200 million that we took from the state, from Bill Lee, for the new building. All of this compounded with the firing of Dr. Mary Clark. I was like, to be asked the question, what is the community saying? I thought it was obvious that the community would be hurt. And I sort of became, in some of those meetings, sort of the designated BIPOC person, sort of tasked with speaking for an entire community. So I remember one of these meetings where Jennifer Turner contextualized the whole Arts Commission situation and their taking of I would guess it was the operational grant, and how, you know, this is nothing to do with TPAC and us doing anything wrong. Daniel Singh made promises and broke them. Really tried to pin the whole thing on Daniel Singh. Oh, my favorite thing is that she was like, Daniel Singh, do you know him?
Oh!
No, Jennifer, we don't all know each other. Also, Singh is a very common name. But I would then connect with him because what an incredible person, because I related to his experience. So I'm glad she name dropped him in that moment, because I got a great friend and mentor out of it. And I just have so much respect for what Daniel Singh tried to do there and did. And it's unfortunate that he's not really getting any credit for the changes that he was pushing during his time as director at Metro Arts. And I think that he's also been, that organization also, I think, placed some folks that I don't think really have equity in mind in terms of the way that they're operating, despite them being from that same cultural experience in a lot of cases. And I think it's sad and confusing being
Metro Arts.
Yeah. I think it's sad and confusing being someone applying for those grants now and feeling like I can't really track a lot of the way that they're communicating, in terms of like getting 3 emails about the same thing and then like another email, and then like you kind of have to piece things together like a bad work thread, and it should be a little easier.
And you need to piece that together.
And
it
we
doesn't
need to,
matter.
yes.
The government doesn't need to do that.
Exactly. So it creates undue work for artists. So for TPAC to not see that, and just having to explain that, you know, that just because the funds weren't necessarily, that they were allocated in a different way, they're still all coming from the state. So in the eyes of the artists and the community, everyone's just seeing it as, these are the organizations that are getting funding, these are the organizations that TPAC highlights, and they're all getting hundreds and thousands of dollars, whereas I can't get like $5,000 to do my play, you know, and I can't do a gallery exhibition, or I would have to fund it myself because it's so challenging to navigate that. So having to explain literally like base level systemic racism to people at the executive team was something that I had to do frequently, you know, like sitting down with my boss and being like, look, I understand that you were promised this money, but can you not see how it is actually like being perceived in the community as the same pot that we're not able to pull from?
Well, and a fundamental misalignment with stated objectives, you know, and that's what we're seeing at Metro Arts, and what you brought up about Daniel Singh's work there, and what they had said to you at TPAC. Like, what will that look like? To do equity work, we're going to need to realize changes. We'll need to see that happen. What will that look like? And as soon as people in power are shown that, they run screaming. So
yeah.
I was actually listening to a podcast earlier this week talking about, you know, the election that just happened, the presidential election, and all the work that was happening in 2022 and 2023 that kind of led up to that moment where it was like an easy clutch for fascism to come back in full form. So this kind of like reminds me of that conversation, because it's very much like you see the groundwork being laid in 2023 with the Art Monopolies and then the defunding, and that it doesn't become a surprise where we are now with fascism is back in fashion.
Yes.
And this really regressive policy making and hiring policies and how staff are moving. So it's just really interesting that you brought in that kind of conversation about, because we also forgot about the $200 million. I remember that was a huge thing in 2023 that TPAC got $200 million for this huge building from Billy, and that brought in the conversation about like state funds coming into the Art Monopolies, and then them fighting over, like, about to stab people metaphorically, over this $3 million pot.
Yeah.
And it's like almost ridiculous to think about these numbers. And then also to feel like, even on the inside, you mentioned a lot of BIPOC turnover. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about that, because that's like a huge thing that comes up in public comments a lot, is we hire people of color. So we should get the money instead of people of color directly as artists. So just route the money to us and we'll give it to them. So if you could probably speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. Racism is cruel. White supremacy is mean. I think that there were a lot of examples like that. Exactly, like, why can't we do something with a small amount of what we did receive from the state to retroactively do some repair with these communities? That's what I was begging for, is can we do something with the state funds that we received to give back?
Right.
Can we reach out to applicants and say, you know, can we help subsidize your project as TPAC, you know? And I saw TPAC as a fiscal sponsor for a few Thrive grant applicants, and I hope they did not take a cut. I think that, I know that was optional, but if they did, that's terrible. Like, there is no reason for TPAC to be getting a cut of any independent artist project like that. And yeah, that meanness, I think just, it was embedded in the culture there, that it wasn't even, and that they were blameless, you know, that we do so much good in the community. And I would just look around the room and say, like, I feel like one of the only, you know, I think you can count the BIPOC employees on this floor on one hand, being the third floor, the administrative floor. And I think during my 2 years there, and this is just an approximate number, I think I saw 5 to 7 BIPOC employees leave or be terminated under questionable circumstances. And I've spoken with former employees at TPAC as well, and just sort of this feeling of like, I need to take care of my career. I can't call this out, and it's not, I can't put myself emotionally through what I would need to come forward about these things that have happened to me. And so I was in a sort of lucky situation to some degree, where I was like, in spite of my sort of youngness in this system and my newness to this organization, at least I feel as though I will be able to find gainful employment quickly. And because of my career in sound design and audio engineering, I know that the people in the theater community who trust me know that my heart is in the right place. And I think that my work with the Episcopal Church in terms of domestic violence advocacy within that system is a really good example of how you can use data mapping and really digital self-advocacy activist tools to move an agenda forward in a righteous way. And I just trusted that I could say what I needed to say and not sign something. And I did leave without negotiating any kind of severance because I didn't want to sign anything. I wanted to be able to come here and tell this story. And sure, like, did I miss out on probably some money? Like, yeah, but I think it's worth it to be here and be able to tell my story. Whereas I feel like a lot of other employees, you know, had to do what they had to do. And I understand that. And I don't think that there is any, much like TPAC said to me, there is no right or wrong time to come forward. If you feel that you've been a survivor of systemic abuse, there is no right or wrong time. You're on your own time. So I would just, my advice to artists and administrators working in these systems who are marginalized folks to just, to keep your mental health first and foremost, to create community and inclusion wherever you are, outside of work if you're not feeling it there, and also to really, like, if you experience something there, to say something as soon as possible. But I understand that that's not always possible. So it's really it's different from person to person, but a survivor's timeline is their own.
Right.
And I think that a lot of institutions will try and shame you for X, Y, or Z, but just remembering that your story is important. Simply existing in that space is important, and you have value, and you have other people in the community who need to see you, so that they can, especially young people, so that they can know that they can be there too, that they can have a seat at those tables, and we can make those tables bigger.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you for saying that. I think that's a really important point to take away from all of this too. We hear that a lot. I think a lot of people struggle with when to speak and when not to speak, and yeah, it's something that I struggle with too, because sometimes you want someone to speak up and say something, and I have to kind of remind myself too that it's everyone's on their own timeline, and everything will align for the good. I wanted also to mention, when you were mentioning about the community engagement and like the repair that you were advocating for, which was something really, really important. And actually, I think around the same time in 2023, that summer, I was having a conversation with Art Monopolies, advocating for them to stand with the Thrive artists, and how big of a stance that would be to have the Art Monopolies say that they are pro-community, pro-local artists, and not just like, you know, in a hallway or any performative measure, but like really say, you know what, fund the artists. We want to work with local artists and we want to platform them. And I kind of got the same response of like, this is like radical, really crazy what you're asking us to do, like stepping outside of our zone. And yet it's really interesting that these kind of orgs also want to say that we're doing community engagement work, and that quote unquote community engagement is them just looking for who agrees with them and platforming them as much as possible, which I think is actually a strategy of the GOP.
Oh, absolutely. I was just going to say that. I was like, we're singing in the White House right now. It's like, you want to get rich? I can help you get rich. Let's get rich together. And you know, a lot of poor people are going to suffer.
Yeah, and they can get diversity. Like, I think that's what's like really parallel about what's happening on the national level and what's happening in Nashville is like the GOP is very good at like, here's our black Republican, here are our women.
Exactly.
And at the same time, you can have these art monopolies do the same exact thing and say, we are engaged with the community. We are embedded with you all, because here's our one black artist.
Yeah.
Or one black artist who had a show that lasted, you know, a couple of weeks, but they can use the picture in perpetuity.
Yeah.
Yep.
To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. This is WXNA LP Nashville. This show is Public Comments, where we are dedicated to advocating for equitable arts funding in Nashville. I'm Christine Hall.
And I'm Lydia Yousief.
And today we are here in the studio with our guest, Nivedhan Singh, an audio engineer, educator, musician, activist, and former TPAC employee. Thank you again so much for joining us, Nivedhan.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I really appreciate the point about like you actually defining community engagement as repair. As action, not just like a framed photo.
yes, and engaging with the community, with literally the community in downtown Nashville. You know, literally with the community in North Nashville.
Yeah.
And
that's radical.
Exactly, and that was being deemed as like, well, it doesn't compute. I don't understand. You didn't say rep opera or ballet in that sentence. Like, what are you doing? And then oh gosh, TPAC rests on the laurels of their Disney musicals and schools program, which I understand is like a nice thing. You know, that they provide professional developments for teachers there to then learn over the course of 3 years how to perform and teach a Disney musical to their students and expose students to theater at a young age, and that's all really great. But I'm also just like, is Disney really our bar? Like, is that is the litmus test for inclusion? Is Disney, Walt Disney, and then it's also the model then ends up being pay to play, because after 3 years, then it's like, now you can buy our licenses for years to come, and it's just. Come on,
money.
You can just
where are our tax dollars going again?
Yeah. So it's I just the excuse of we were doing good in schools, and also I've witnessed racism through the lens of that program. Specifically, a teaching artist, Ginger Newman, when we were in a middle school in North Nashville. 2 black students said, we're not going to use your character names for this. We're going to use your street names, and like couldn't read the room of like how like saying street names to a bunch of black students might be weird. And then after the lesson, a student actually heartbreakingly went up to their teacher and said, like, Mr. Blank, do I have a street name? And it just broke my heart. And I was just standing there like, what happens now? You know, in the same school, that same teaching artist referred to a staff meeting or an email chain that was happening without her, with the predominantly black teacher team, referred to that as the Underground Railroad.
Oh my.
Like, you need to CC me on emails. Enough of this Underground Railroad stuff.
Oh. And did she then take a long, hard look in the mirror?
No. And did my supervisor, Kristen, then fire her from TPAC and never work with her again? No, she just moved her to a different school.
Oh.
You know, so like, you're going to say you're doing good in the community. You can't call black teachers having an email thread without you the Underground Railroad. And I had to explain that to an attorney. Like, why that was not okay. Like, she sat me down and was like, can you explain why that was racist, Mr. Singh? Like, and that's the kind of thing that they subject you to for saying something like that, is, well, can you just explain, even though they know, right? They're trying to get a rise out of you and make you emotional so they can say you're not credible.
Right.
I mean, or maybe it's an accurate description in that obviously her gaze needed to be escaped.
Yeah, but that person stayed on payroll. They're still front and center in a lot of their summer camp programming, and I just thought that was completely inappropriate. I don't care how valuable an asset someone is. I don't care how good they are with most of the kids, quote unquote. Like, it doesn't matter. There's no place for a comment like that.
Oh, wow.
There's no place for the same teaching artist mimicked, we were doing a Spanish language Aladdin, and during one of the rehearsals, in front of like 7th grade students from the Latinx community, we're going to put on a Spanish speaking Aladdin, did like, during one of the scenes, did like a, you might call it like Speedy Gonzalez impression kind of thing in front of these kids. And I'm like, this is not bringing us closer to equity. This is not setting a good example for these kids. You know, having teachers performing and doing Jamaican Sebastian accents and Little Mermaid professional development days, like white teachers doing Jamaican accents, like, and all of us standing there and being like, is this okay? I feel like it's not. So that's the norm, and that's the thing, is it's like, but we're doing so much good. We're empowering these students, but it's not enough. It's not enough. And to point to what you were saying earlier, that yes, they've got diversity. Diversity, but like you said, diversity is roll call. Diversity is like, who's in the room? Raise your hand. Inclusion is how do those people feel once they're in that room. And I think that we were doing a diverse program with the Disney program. I don't know that it was inclusive. So I don't know that we can use the excuse that, like, well, we do good work, so.
Oh, yeah. Or like you said, the teacher is doing fine for most of the students, but then that exposes that issue that for some reason there's a persistent attitude that a minority would be less just because there may be fewer of those students in the room. And then we're saying that this is an equity initiative. And it does not add up. It's amazing how egregious, not just the ignorance, but the insensitivity. It is clearly willful.
Yeah, and then you don't see the commitment to training your staff to be able to speak to it at all. So during the transition of power, I guess you could call it, after Dr. Mary was fired and before Roberta stepped into the inclusive arts officer role full time, there was like, I would say probably a 6 to 8 month gap where there was just nothing.
Oh.
There was no one there leading that programming. So for 6 to 8 months, like, I think I just felt like, oh, okay, so we're just like not doing inclusion for 6 to 8 months. Like, when will that pick up? And right when I left, they brought in another organization. I cannot remember the name of the organization now. It was like Blue or Empower or something. But they came in and led some, you know, those usual, not, you know, those 60-minute like implicit bias workshops kind of thing. We'll do one a quarter, and so they did that after, but there was this dead area where I was like, if something happens, where do I go? Like, who do I talk to? Where do I feel represented at that table? And to be questioned over and over again, like, why are you speaking ill of Roberta being in this role? I don't understand. And I said, well, I do think she's experienced, and then, you know, I was told, well, you always end those sentences with a but. It's like, but what? It's like, but she's a white woman who's been here for 30 years, and maybe, you know, in terms of being asked about my goals at that organization, that was my goal. I had applied to be the chief diversity officer. I think that I'm suited for that work. I think my experience puts me in a good spot to do that work. And to be asked, you know, where do you see yourself moving up? It's like, well, you're going to be here till you retire. I can't stay at entry level for 10 years. So I need to move up. I need to feel like there's someone at the table already who looks like me so that I can even imagine that. And you just feel worthless and helpless, and like there's no way to move up or out, and unless you just leave. And that's what I did, is I chose my own mental health. I chose my family and my advocacy with the church, and I chose my art, you know, and like now I'm focusing on my band. You know, I'm in the only Asian fronted punk rock band in Nashville, which is funny because there are some, you know, asterisks to that. Like Strange Curry is out there. I love Adarsh. They play like rock covers of classic Bollywood songs, and they're incredible too. It's like a different genre. And then Kristen Alexis is out there playing in an emo band, and she's incredible. So there are other AAPI artists doing similar things, but I really love playing in this band because it's like I grew up in New Jersey in that sort of emo rock scene, and so I think a lot of people when they see me get off stage, like they're not expecting me to sound like Warped Tour, and that's like what I grew up with. So I think we provide this really unique scene experience to that scene, which again, you know, it's another arts scene where I'm seeing, you know, is there diversity sometimes? Is there inclusion? I don't think so. Like bookers in town, I think, are very remiss to book artists that don't look like what you would traditionally see in that genre. And so I think that I've decided to focus my efforts on those spaces where I have some control over what's going on. And then as for the theater work, like being committed to just being one of the best sound designers in Nashville. And I am. Like if you've seen theater in Nashville, you've seen a show I've designed. And so I'm out here working, and I love that work, like being able to work with these creative teams, and every day is exciting, every week is different, and that is so much better than like sitting around being forced to do events for the opera, ballet, and rep. Like the great, you know, I'm not saying they've never put on a great show, any of those people, but it was just boring because their cycles just repeat. So it's like, you know, if I go in and suggest an alternative engagement strategy, you know, I think that there was sort of this defense of like, well, we've been doing this series for 20 years, so like, why would we change it? You know, and it's like, well, it's just an echo chamber of the big performing arts organizations, and there's other theater happening in Nashville. So like, shout out to Street Theater Company, where I'm on the executive board. I mean, they are one of the only arts institutions in Nashville that has been that provided a BIPOC technical theater apprenticeship that was paid at the same at a cooperative rate, the same level of whomever they would be shadowing. So like if you were shadowing the sound designer, like you were making almost or the same rate as that sound designer to learn the technical theater experience firsthand from like a top tier theater company in North Nashville. Like Street Theater is doing it. They're one of the only organizations that I have worked with who is setting like clear inclusion quotas and goals in their board and on their stages. And I'm really proud to be a part of that organization. Also the Quiet Voice, Alex Wong and Leah Light have started a beautiful organization highlighting underrepresented voices in art and music, and they do a festival, and I'm proud to be on that board as well. So the work happens, the work continues, and I'm grateful to be unburdened by the sort of racist arts monopoly agenda. Like I can use less Bill Lee you know, in my life, and until there is some kind of divestment from those funds, which I don't see ever happening in TPAC, it will always be locked in step with the GOP.
I'm wondering if you could speak more about transitioning out into the community work. That seems to be your strength, and also like you know, you spoke like there's still racism, but we still have to deal with that.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if you could speak a little more to maybe the differences. I feel like you're saying there's a lot more independence and creativity that can come in from the community space.
Yes, and I think that, you know, when you're working with or being hired as a contractor for a large arts organization, like you're still putting yourself at risk to some degree, but I think you feel a little bit more ownership over it. When you can say, you know, like I'm choosing to be here and they're choosing to hire me, and you know, there is nothing, I'm not like beholden to this beyond this contract. So I think there's more of a feeling of if I see something, I will say something, you know, because they are lucky to be hiring me for this role, and if they're going to treat me poorly, then I'm going to say something, because it's not like I don't have my retirement with these folks, you know what I mean? And I think that there was a lot of that. But I mean, just look at the retention, you know, and it's like with these organizations, the turnover is so high, and I wasn't seeing any opportunity to like lock in and grow and professionally develop at one of these organizations yet. I'm not saying they're not out there, but I wasn't feeling that. So taking it into my own hands and doing my own training and being able to be able to develop myself as an artist and a technician on my own terms has been liberating and hard. Freelance is feast or famine and all that. So there have been some growing pains along with it. But even if I don't need TPAC to tell me that I'm worthy and of value and have something to contribute to this arts industry.
Certainly not.
I'm going to do that on my own, and I have been. And I think that finding community with other artists has been huge. Between the arts equity folks and these different boards, and being able to work with different theater technicians and artists and actors and musicians, and I'm doing sound at the Bowery Vault now. Come see a show. It's great. I love what it is becoming now, but it has been a hard road to get here, because there were times when I just needed to keep a full-time job just to afford to live in Nashville. And so it was hard to leave the comfort of that, bi-monthly check or whatever, and kind of bet on myself. But so far I've been finding fulfillment in it and artistic opportunities, so it's been good. But for anyone looking to make that transition, I think it's just leaning into your network, leaning into your friends, leaning into the people who love and know you already. If you're working somewhere where you don't feel known or heard or loved, go flock to those people who know, hear, and love you.
I love that. I think I love another strand that we've been hearing is how much community artists also love the First Amendment rights that they get back when they're working in the community. That there's a lot more that can be said and done in community than there is in the institution. So
Yeah.
I feel like that's being brought out here as well.
Yes. The thing that they've branded as too radical might just be your lived experience. So you need to go live and experience people that believe you and see you in your experience like that. Yes, I do get paid by large arts organizations to come on contract, and I feel comfortable coming out here and speaking about this because, like I said, the artists that know me and know that my heart's in the right place. I have very little reason to make anything up about my experiences at TPAC or at the Rep. I'm very upfront about all of it. I'm just grateful that I've been able to stay both employed and fulfilled in the freelance life right now. But again, maybe I'm too radical for you, but if you're working with me, I think it also says something about your organization if you're working with me as well. So
yeah. I think we're now hopefully entering a wave in Nashville where these art monopolies start to learn from communities. So hopefully, and I feel like there were people like you within the institution that were hoping that they could do that. But in order for that to happen, the community has to be funded and has to be strong. So hopefully we see better days in Nashville for that. So I think our last question for you, Nivedhan, it's been amazing talking to you. I feel like we hit a lot of solid points that connected a lot of our guests as well, and a lot of the narrative that we've been hearing in Nashville. So it's like such a good episode to kind of pull everything together. Like, what's going on nationally, what's going on at Metro Arts and outside of Metro Arts. So if you were an arts commissioner, what would be a policy change that you would bring about, you would push for?
A lot of organizations don't have the staffing to do a lot of the reporting that is necessary to apply for these grants. And I think that I would provide and keep on staff grant writing admins that could go and work with applicants firsthand. Daniel was doing similar things, which sucks that I have to say this again, but making that more integrated, that Daniel Singh approach of go into the community, talk to the artists, sit down with them and their application, make sure they're clicking the right boxes, checking the right things, and being there in an overstaffed way, you can get someone there on the phone when you need something. So staffing, and just being anti-racist in your policy making. Just make it so that you are using an anti-racist lens when you're looking at your applicants and when you're looking at the arts landscape here in Nashville, because we all know that it's not called Music City because of Johnny Cash or Dolly Parton. It's called Music City because of the Fisk Jubilee Singers. So we cannot forget the history of this city and why it is what it is, and that is rooted in anti-racism.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I really love the point. Well, okay. Well, that was a good note to end. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Lydia.
All
Thank
the
you,
amazing
Christine.
ideas and thoughts. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you also to our listeners. This is WXNA LP Nashville 101.5 FM. I'm Christine Hall.
And I'm Lydia Yousief.
Thank you so much to our guest, Nivedhan Singh. You can learn more if you're interested at nivedhansingh.com. That's NIVEDHANSINGH.com. On Instagram, that's nsing1023. And if you are interested in finding out more about Arts Equity Nashville, we're artsequitynashville.org. On Instagram, at Arts Equity Nashville. If you are interested in sharing some info about being a working artist in Nashville, your experiences are welcome. We've got a working artist survey on our site. And right now, we are going to be turning it over to DJ Shy Boy. Thank you.
We're always having a yard sale, but it was just our dignity, you know?
We chanted the mother song. We held our breath. Inhale. Exhale.
You're listening to Public Comments, an arts equity radio show on WXNA 101.5 FM, Nashville.